She was chained to the mountain for centuries. Until a human's touch set her free, the storm had never stopped over the Black Mountain. Lightning crawled across the clouds like living veins, and the wind screamed as if the land itself was warning anyone who came too close. For centuries, every species on the planet Carveth had learned the same lesson. You do not go to the mountain. Ships avoided its airspace. Maps showed it as empty. Stories said it was cursed, alive, and hungry. Ethan Hale had never heard any of those stories. His ship fell from the sky in silence. One moment he was running emergency checks, trying to stabilize a damaged reactor after a micrometeor strike. The next, the navigation system went dark, gravity twisted, and the world outside the viewport turned into fire. The escape thrusters failed. The distress signal cut out halfway through transmission. Then the ground came up to meet him. When Ethan woke, his head was ringing and the cockpit smelled of burned metal. Smoke drifted through broken panels. The ship was tilted at a sharp angle, half buried in rock and black soil. Red warning lights blinked weakly, one after another, shutting down. "Okay, okay," he muttered, forcing himself to breathe. His suit had protected him, but barely. His ribs hurt. His left arm felt stiff. The ship was dead. No power, no long-range comms, no chance of liftoff. The temperature outside was dropping fast. Ethan pulled himself free of the harness and looked through the cracked canopy. A massive wall of dark stone rose in front of him, stretching high into the storm clouds. The mountain was not just tall. It felt wrong. The air around it vibrated like standing too close to heavy machinery. Static crawled across his skin. He checked his scanner. The readings made no sense. Energy spikes, magnetic distortions, systems older than anything in human records. Shelter was his only option. Grabbing his pack and tools, Ethan climbed out of the wreck and moved toward the mountain. The wind pushed against him, but as he reached the stone wall, something strange happened. The storm weakened. The screaming wind faded to a low whisper as if the mountain allowed him passage. A narrow opening revealed itself between two slabs of rock. It was not marked. It was not natural. The edges were smooth, worn by time rather than weather. Ethan hesitated. Every instinct told him this place was dangerous. But the cold was worse, and his oxygen supply would not last long in the open storm. He stepped inside. The passage descended into darkness, but faint blue light pulsed along the walls, activating as he passed. Symbols flared to life, alien, ancient, and beautiful. The air inside was warm, still. "This is not a cave," Ethan whispered. The corridor opened into a massive underground chamber. The ceiling disappeared into shadow. Tall pillars of stone and metal surrounded the space, cracked but standing. At the center of the chamber stood something Ethan could not understand at first. A figure. She was suspended in the air by chains made of glowing black metal, her arms spread wide, her feet barely touching the stone below. Energy flowed through the chains in slow, pulsing waves. They were embedded into the mountain itself. She looked almost human. Her skin shimmered faintly like moonlight on water. Long silver hair drifted around her face, moving as if underwater. Her eyes were closed. Lines of pain and exhaustion were carved into her features. She was alive. Ethan froze. His scanner went wild, screaming warnings. Energy levels beyond safe limits. Unknown biological structure. Power systems older than human civilization. He should have run. Instead, he took a step closer. "Hey," he said softly, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Can you hear me?" They glowed a deep, ancient blue. The moment their gazes met, the entire chamber reacted. Symbols flared brighter. The chains tightened with a sharp metallic sound. Energy surged, and Ethan was thrown backward, slamming into a pillar. Pain exploded through his shoulder. The figure gasped, her body arching as the chains burned brighter. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. A silent scream. "I'm sorry," Ethan shouted, pushing himself up. "I didn't mean to." She looked at him again, fear and disbelief filling her eyes. Elira had waited centuries for this moment, not this moment exactly. She had imagined conquerors, armies, scientists with cold eyes, executioners. Every visitor before had been one of those. This one was different. He was bleeding. His movements were slow and careful. His eyes held shock, yes, but also concern. Elira tried to speak. Nothing happened. The chains burned hotter in response, forcing her silent. Ethan saw the pain on her face and immediately stepped back, raising his hands. "Okay, okay," he said quickly. "I won't get closer, I didn't know anyone was here." Her eyes softened just a little. Yes, he knelt down, pulling tools from his pack. I'm Ethan, I'm not here to hurt you. My ship crashed, I just needed shelter. Elira watched him with growing confusion. He spoke to her as if she mattered. No threats, no commands, no fear-driven hatred. When Ethan approached a nearby console embedded in the floor, ancient sensors screamed warnings. Red light flooded the chamber. Defensive systems powered up for the first time in hundreds of years. Elira felt it immediately. The prison was waking up. She shook her head violently, trying to warn him. Ethan noticed. "You don't want me to touch it," he said. "Okay, that's fair." The alarms faded. Elira stared at him in disbelief. The others never listened. Time passed strangely in the chamber. Minutes, maybe hours. Ethan set up a small emergency light and ration heater. He kept his distance but stayed where she could see him. "You've been here a long time, haven't you?" he asked softly. Her eyes closed for a moment. "Centuries." Ethan swallowed. That's not right." "If I don't fix that, this whole place might collapse," he said, more to himself than to her. "I'll be careful." The chains reacted, tightening again, but weaker this time. Her eyes widened in shock. Ethan stepped back, heart pounding. "What did I do?" Elira stared at him with something she had not felt in centuries. Hope. Far above the mountain, ancient satellites reactivated. Across the galaxy, forgotten alarms began to ring. The prison had detected an anomaly. A human had touched the chains. And the mountain, for the first time in centuries, was no longer certain it could hold her. The chamber did not return to silence after the chains flickered. A low hum spread through the stone, deeper than sound, felt more in the bones than the ears. The blue symbols along the walls pulsed unevenly now, like a tired heart struggling to keep a rhythm. Dust fell from the ceiling in thin lines. Ethan stepped back until his shoulders touched cold stone. "I didn't mean to do that," he said, breathing hard. "I swear." Elira watched him closely. For centuries, she had learned every sign of danger. The tightening of muscles before violence, the sharp focus of eyes before betrayal, the hunger for control. She saw none of it in him. Instead, she saw fear mixed with guilt. The chains responded slowly, settling into a weaker glow than before. The pain eased just enough for her to think clearly. That alone was terrifying. Nothing ever changed. Until now. Ethan looked down at his scanner again, frowning. "That doesn't make sense," he muttered. "My biology shouldn't affect alien tech like this, especially not tech this old." He glanced up at her. "Does it always react like that?" Elira tried to speak again. The chains burned at her throat, stopping the sound before it formed. Her jaw trembled with the effort. Ethan noticed immediately. "Don't," he said quickly. "Don't hurt yourself." He took a few careful steps closer, slow enough that she could see every movement. The chains did not tighten this time. They vibrated uncertain. "You don't have to talk," he said. "I'll figure something out." That sentence hit her harder than any weapon ever had. No one had ever tried to understand. They had studied her, feared her, blamed her. But not this. Ethan stopped just outside the invisible boundary where the chain's energy was strongest. He crouched, examining the nearest anchor point where the black metal disappeared into the mountain. "These aren't restraints," he murmured. "They're part of a system, power, control, suppression, all in one." Elira followed his gaze. Yes. The prison was not built to hold her body alone. It was built to crush her will. As Ethan studied the anchors, his suit alarms chimed softly. Radiation spikes, energy fluctuations. The mountain was waking further. Far above them, ancient machines buried deep in orbit adjusted their aim. The watchers had noticed. Ethan felt it too, though he did not know how. A pressure in the air, like being observed by something vast and cold. "Someone's monitoring this place," he said quietly. "Or something." Elira's eyes darkened. They were always watching. Ethan stood and paced, rubbing his hands together. "Okay, let's think this place is old, really old, older than any modern power grid. That means redundancy, fail-safes, manual systems." He glanced at her again. "And maybe mistakes." He pulled a small tool from his belt and approached a cracked control pillar near the wall. The moment he touched it, the symbols flared brighter, but instead of attacking, they shifted. The system was adapting. Elira gasped softly as the chains loosened a fraction more. The pain faded from unbearable to merely constant. She clenched her fists, afraid to hope. Ethan felt the change and froze. "Okay, that's good, right?" Her eyes met his. Yes, he smiled just a little. "Good." The prison did not like that. A sudden surge of energy slammed into the chamber. The chains snapped tight, lifting Elira slightly off the ground. The mountain groaned in anger. Ethan was thrown to the floor again, his helmet cracking against stone. He rolled, coughing, pain flaring through his ribs. "No," he shouted, pushing himself up. "Stop it!" The words were useless, but the intent was not. The surge weakened. Ethan staggered to his feet, blood trickling down his temple. He looked furious now, not afraid. "You don't get to do that," he growled at the unseen system. "You don't get to hurt her." Elira stared at him, stunned. No one had ever defended her. He placed his hand flat against the stone floor, steadying himself. His skin touched the ancient surface directly through a tear in his glove. The chamber reacted instantly. Energy patterns twisted. The symbols shifted shape as if confused. The chains flickered again, weaker than before. Elira felt something snap, not physically but deep inside the prison's logic. The system had never accounted for this. Human nervous systems operated on different electrical frequencies. Human instincts did not follow expected patterns. And human empathy was not something the prison understood at all. Ethan pulled his hand back, staring at the torn glove. "Great," he muttered. "Now I'm part of it." Elira almost laughed. Instead, a tear slipped down her cheek, glowing faintly as it fell. Ethan noticed. "Oh," he said softly. He approached her slowly, carefully. The chains vibrated but did not tighten. He stopped an arm's length away. "You're not a weapon, are you?" he asked. Elira closed her eyes. "No, you were put here because you scared someone." "Yes," Ethan exhaled sharply. "That tracks." He sat down on the stone floor near her, keeping his hands visible. "I don't know how long I'll be stuck here," he said. "Rescue might come, or it might not, but I'm not leaving you like this." The mountain shook faintly. Far away, fleets began to move. The council chambers filled with light as ancient alarms echoed for the first time in generations. Symbols long thought dormant burned across holographic displays. The prison is destabilizing. A human signature detected. Panic spread like fire. Back in the chamber, Elira felt the shift in the wider system. The Watchers were awake. Their fear pressed against her mind like cold metal. She tried again to speak, to warn him. The chains burned. Ethan saw her pain and immediately reached for a nearby control node, not the chains themselves, but the power line feeding them. "Easy," he whispered. "I won't touch you, just this." His fingers brushed the conduit. The reaction was immediate and violent. Energy surged through Ethan's body, throwing him backward. He screamed as his muscles locked, nerves burning. The system tried to reject him. Elira screamed silently. The chains flared bright, then dimmed sharply. Ethan collapsed, gasping, smoke rising from his suit. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Ethan groaned and rolled onto his side. "Okay," he wheezed. That hurt." Elira stared at the chains. They were weaker, not broken, but cracked. Ethan pushed himself upright, shaking. "Did it do anything?" Elira nodded slowly. He laughed weakly. "Good, then it was worth it." Her breath caught. That single sentence shattered something ancient and heavy inside her. She had endured centuries of pain, but this kindness was overwhelming. The mountain rumbled again, stronger this time. Cracks spread across the ceiling, glowing with unstable energy. Ethan looked up. "We're running out of time," he said. "Whatever this place is, it's failing." Elira knew why. The prison was designed to last forever as long as she believed she deserved it, and now she didn't. Above the planet, alien fleets dropped out of hyperspace. Weapons powered up. Orders were shouted across bridges filled with fear. Containment breach imminent. Authorize planetary sterilization if necessary. Back in the chamber, Ethan stood beneath a falling dust cloud and looked at the chained figure before him. "I don't know who you are," he said, "or what you can do, but I know this is wrong." He placed his bare hand against the stone again, closer to her this time. The chains screamed. Then they weakened. Elira felt the pain ease further than it ever had before. For the first time in centuries, she could breathe freely. The prison was losing control, and the galaxy was about to remember something it had tried very hard to forget. Hope once touched by a human does not stay contained. The mountain no longer felt asleep. Its stone walls trembled in slow, uneven waves, like something massive turning in uneasy rest. Thin cracks of blue light ran across the ceiling and pillars, spreading farther each minute. The ancient prison was failing, and it knew it. Ethan stood near the center of the chamber, breathing hard. Every nerve in his body still burned from the last surge of energy. His hands shook, but he kept them steady by pressing them together. Elira watched him with eyes filled with fear and wonder. The chains around her arms and legs were dimmer now, their glow uneven. They still held her, but not with the absolute control they once had. For the first time in centuries, she could feel the weight of her own body instead of the prison carrying it for her. Ethan looked up at her. I think the system is reacting to me like a fault, he said. Like I'm not supposed to exist in its logic. Elira slowly nodded. That was exactly it. The prison had been built by minds that believed everything could be controlled. Power, fear, even choice. Humans were not part of that design. Their emotions, their stubbornness, their refusal to accept fate, it broke patterns. Ethan sat down heavily against a pillar. I need a minute, he admitted. She watched him rest, his chest rising and falling, blood dried along the side of his face. He was fragile, easily broken, and yet the prison feared him more than it feared her. That truth shook her. She closed her eyes, focusing inward. For centuries, she had been forced to keep her power folded in on itself, locked behind mental barriers the prison enforced. Now, with the chains weakened, she felt faint echoes of its stirring, not enough to escape, enough to remember. She remembered the sky of her homeworld, bright and alive. She remembered standing between fleets, refusing to fire. She remembered the council's cold voices calling mercy a defect. She remembered choosing anyway. A sharp pain flared as one chain tightened suddenly, reacting to her thoughts. She gasped, her body arching slightly. Ethan was on his feet instantly. Hey, I didn't touch anything. The chain loosened again, uncertain. Ethan stared at it. It reacted to you, he said. Not me. Elira met his eyes. Yes, he frowned. So it's not just physical controls, it's tied to your mind, your state. The prison listened to fear, to guilt, to obedience, and she had given it centuries of all three. Ethan rubbed his chin slowly. Then maybe the way out isn't forcing it open. The chamber shook harder, dust raining down. Above them, far beyond stone and storm, alien ships locked weapons into firing position. Commanders watched energy readings climb, their fear growing with every spike. They did not see a person in chains. They saw a mistake about to be undone. In the chamber, Ethan stepped closer again, careful but determined. I need you to trust me, he said softly. Elira hesitated. Trust was dangerous, but so was staying silent forever. She took a slow breath and tried again to speak, not with sound, but with intent, with emotion. The chains burned her throat, but weaker now. Instead of crushing the thought, they distorted it. Ethan felt it, a pressure behind his eyes, not words, but feelings. Loneliness so deep it felt endless, pain stretched across centuries, and beneath it all a quiet, stubborn kindness that refused to die. Ethan staggered back a step, clutching his head. Oh, wow. He looked at her with new understanding. You've been alone for a very long time. Elira's eyes filled with tears. Yes, he swallowed hard. They were afraid of you because you wouldn't do what they wanted. Yes, and they called you a monster to make it easier. Yes, Ethan laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. That's the oldest trick there is. The mountain groaned again, louder. A crack split the floor near Ethan's feet. He looked down, then back up at her. They're coming, aren't they? Elira nodded slowly. He straightened. Then we don't have much time. He moved to the largest anchor point, where several chains merged into the mountain. If I can disrupt the power flow here, it might weaken all of them at once. Elira's eyes widened. Danger. I know, he said, as if hearing her, but sitting around isn't helping either. He pulled off his damaged glove completely, exposing his bare hand. The skin was already blistered in places from earlier contact. Elira felt fear spike inside her. The prison reacted instantly. The chains tightened, feeding on her panic. Pain surged through her body, sharp and blinding. Ethan cried out as the energy feedback hit him too, electricity racing up his arm. He gritted his teeth and held on. Don't be afraid, he gasped. It's okay, I've got you. The words mattered. Elira forced herself to breathe, slowly. She focused on Ethan, not the chains, not the watchers, not the centuries of suffering. She focused on the human standing in front of her, hurting himself just to give her a chance. Her fear eased. The chains loosened. Ethan felt it immediately. The pain dropped from unbearable to merely agonizing. He pressed his palm flat against the anchor. The prison screamed. Symbols flared wildly across the walls, no longer controlled patterns but chaotic bursts. Systems that had never been challenged began to fail. Elira felt something tear loose inside the structure of the prison's control. A memory gate opened. She gasped as sound finally tore free from her throat. Stop, she whispered. The word echoed through the chamber. Ethan froze, staring at her in shock. You spoke. Her voice was weak, rough from centuries of silence, but it was real. She looked at him, tears falling freely now. "You will die if you continue." Ethan smiled, small and tired. "That's okay." Her eyes widened. "It is not okay." He shook his head. "If this place collapses with you still chained, you die too. I won't let that happen." The mountain shook violently, throwing Ethan to one knee. Large chunks of stone crashed down around them. Far above, the fleet commanders received final authorization codes. Prepare to fire. In the chamber, Elira gathered what little strength she had. The prison's grip on her mind was weakened, but not gone. She pushed against it, not with force, but with clarity. "I was not chained because I was dangerous," she said, her voice growing steadier with each word. "I was chained because I refused to destroy." Ethan looked up at her, eyes shining. "They told the galaxy I was a weapon," she continued, "but I was their conscience." The chains flickered violently as if the system itself rejected that truth. Ethan understood then. "They made the prison depend on your shame," he said. "On you believing them?" Elira nodded. "Yes. Then let's break that." Ethan stood again, placing both hands on the anchor despite the pain. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said firmly. "Choosing mercy is not a crime." The words struck deeper than any blow. Something inside Elira finally shattered. She believed him. The chains screamed, light flashing wildly, then dimmed sharply. One of the smaller restraints around her wrist cracked, a visible fracture running through the black metal. Elira cried out, not in pain, but in release. Ethan laughed through clenched teeth. "That's it. That's working." The mountain began to collapse in earnest now. The prison could not hold both its structure and its control. Elira felt her power stirring stronger, no longer completely bound, not enough to escape fully, but enough to act. She focused on Ethan. "Move," she said urgently. He barely had time to jump back as the anchor point exploded in a burst of light and stone. The force threw him across the chamber, slamming him hard into a pillar. Everything went white. When Ethan came to, he was lying on the cold stone floor. His ears rang, his vision blurred. "Elira," he croaked, "I am here." Her voice was clearer now, stronger. He forced himself to sit up. One of her chains was broken completely, hanging uselessly from her wrist. The others flickered weakly, struggling to reassert control. She looked different, straighter, brighter, awake. The mountain roared around them as ancient systems failed one after another. Ethan laughed weakly. Guess that did something." Elira looked at him with an expression he did not yet understand, gratitude mixed with awe. "You should not exist," she said softly. "By every calculation they ever made, you should not exist." He shrugged. "We hear that a lot." Above them, weapons powered to full charge. Below, a prison built on fear was breaking apart. And for the first time in centuries, Elira believed she might actually walk free, not because of power, but because a human had reminded her who she truly was. The mountain was dying. Stones screamed as ancient supports failed one after another. Entire sections of the ceiling collapsed, crashing into the chamber with thunder that shook the ground far beyond the black mountain. Dust filled the air, glowing faintly with blue light from failing energy lines. Ethan struggled to his feet, every part of his body aching. His vision swam, but he forced himself to focus. "Elira," he called again. She hovered slightly above the ground now, no longer fully held by the chains. One wrist was free. The others still clung to her, but weakly, like tired hands that no longer believed in their own strength. "I am here," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. Ethan felt a wave of relief. "Good. That's really good. This place is coming down. It is tied to the mountain, to systems across this world and beyond. If it collapses uncontrolled, it will release everything at once. Automated responses designed to erase me if containment fails." Commanders watched the energy readings spike beyond safe limits. "This is Admiral Sareth," a cold voice echoed across the fleet channels. "Final warning, the human must step away. Termination sequence will begin in 30 cycles. I'm not leaving you. Neither do I." The moment he crossed the invisible boundary, the chains screamed in protest. Energy surged toward him, trying to force him back. He stayed. "I'm here," he said through gritted teeth. "I'm not afraid of them." And Ethan was offering none of it. "Listen to me," she said, gripping his wrist gently with her free hand. Her touch was warm, real. "If the Council fires, the mountain will be destroyed. I can shield you for a moment, but not long." "Then what do we do?" Shockwaves rippled through the stone, tearing ancient structures apart. the chamber filled with blinding light. Ethan was thrown to the ground, arms raised instinctively. Elira screamed, not in pain, but in fury. The chains flared bright, trying to force her back into submission. She refused. For the first time in centuries, she pushed outward instead of inward. A barrier of shimmering light expanded around her and Ethan, absorbing the worst of the blast. The force still crushed against it, driving her to her knees. Ethan crawled to her side. Elira. He wrapped his arms around Elira without thinking, shielding her with his own body even though it made no sense. "I've got you," he whispered. Something inside the prison broke completely. The chains flickered wildly, confused by the conflicting signals. Protection instead of fear, sacrifice instead of submission. One by one they began to fail. Elira felt the final mental lock shatter. Her power surged not as destruction but as control. She stood. The remaining chains snapped like brittle glass, falling away and dissolving into dust before they hit the ground. Elira was free. The mountain froze mid-collapse. Every falling stone, every surge of energy, every automated weapon system locked in place as if time itself had paused. Ethan stared up at her, awed. She looked radiant now, light flowing across her skin like starlight. Her eyes blazed with calm strength, not rage. She gently lifted him to his feet. "Stay behind me," she said. Above the planet, the fleet's sensors went dark all at once. Panic erupted across command bridges. What just happened? The energy weapon platforms in orbit powered down simultaneously. Not destroyed, disabled, silent. The third strike never came. Ethan exhaled shakily. "You did it." "We did." "I never was." Orders to destroy civilian worlds. Her refusal. The Council's decision to erase her from history. Gasps echoed across the galaxy. Ethan watched, stunned. "You're exposing them." "I am simply ending the silence." "You will." Storm clouds parted overhead, the endless lightning fading for the first time in living memory. Ethan shielded his eyes as they descended to solid ground far from the collapsing slopes. When the light faded, he realized they were standing in a wide valley he had not seen before, lush, green, untouched by storms. He looked around in disbelief. This was all under the mountain. "So what happens now?" "No pressure. I just didn't like seeing someone chained." And in that moment, every world listening understood something profound. The most dangerous force in the universe was not ancient power. It was compassion, backed by the courage to act on it. The valley remained silent long after the mountain collapsed. Dust drifted slowly through the air like falling snow, glowing faintly before fading into nothing. The storm clouds above broke apart, revealing a calm sky that no one on Carveth had seen in centuries. Sunlight touched the land gently, as if unsure it was welcome. Ethan stood beside Elira, his legs weak, his body exhausted beyond anything he had ever known. He watched the sky, half expecting the alien fleet to recover and fire again. They did not. High above the planet, thousands of ships hung motionless. Their weapons were dark. Their command systems locked. Entire armadas reduced to silent witnesses. Ethan let out a slow breath he felt like he had been holding his entire life. "So, I guess that worked," he said quietly. Elira smiled faintly. "Yes, it did." She looked different now. Not just free, but whole. The tension that had lived in her posture was gone. The weight of centuries no longer pressed on her shoulders, yet there was no hunger for revenge in her eyes, only calm purpose. "That was incredible," Ethan said, turning to her. "You could have destroyed them." "I could have," she agreed, "but that would have proven them right," he nodded. "Yeah, I get that." Across the galaxy, the truth spread faster than any fleet ever could. Council members shouted orders that no longer mattered. Civilizations watched recordings of the ancient crimes replayed in full clarity. The lies unraveled under the weight of their own history. For the first time in a very long time, the galaxy was forced to remember who Elira truly was, not a destroyer, a protector. On the ground, Ethan suddenly swayed. His knees buckled. Elira caught him instantly, steadying him with surprising gentleness. "You are injured," she said. He laughed weakly. "Yeah, that's starting to catch up with me." She lowered him carefully onto a smooth stone and knelt beside him. Light gathered softly around her hands as she examined his burns and bruises. "This will ease the pain," she said, "but you will need rest." "I'm okay," he replied. "I've had worse." She looked at him unimpressed. "You nearly let a prison tear you apart." "Occupational hazard," he said with a small grin. She shook her head slowly, but there was warmth in her expression. Moments later, the air above the valley shimmered. A small human rescue craft dropped out of warp, battered but functional. It hovered uncertainly, clearly unsure whether it was about to be destroyed. Ethan looked up, eyes widening. That's a human ship." The craft transmitted a cautious hail. "Unknown entity on the surface. This is the exploration vessel Horizon's Reach. We detected massive energy fluctuations, and Ethan Hale, is that you?" Ethan laughed, relief flooding through him. "Yeah, it's me. I'm alive, mostly." The channel fell silent for a moment. Then shouting erupted on the other end. The ship descended carefully, landing at the edge of the valley. Medics rushed out, weapons half raised until they saw Ethan wave weakly. They froze when they saw Elira. She stood calmly, hands open, radiating quiet authority. The medics hesitated, unsure whether to run or kneel. Ethan glanced at her. They're friendly, just surprised." She nodded. "I will not harm them." That alone seemed to calm the air. As Ethan was carefully lifted onto a stretcher, he reached out and grabbed Elira's hand. "You're not going to disappear, right?" he asked quietly. She looked down at him. "No," she said. "I have work to do." He smiled. "Good, the galaxy could use someone like you." As the medics loaded him into the ship, Elira stepped back, watching as the hatch closed. For the first time since her imprisonment, she was truly alone, and she was not afraid. The human ship lifted off, climbing into the clear sky. Above it, the alien fleet slowly powered down their engines, no longer an occupying force, but uncertain observers. Elira rose into the air, her presence calm but unmistakable. Her voice carried again, not as a threat, but as a declaration. "The age of fear is over," she said. "No being will be chained for choosing mercy." Worlds listened. Some resisted, some denied, many wept. On Earth, leaders and civilians alike watched the broadcasts in stunned silence as the story unfolded. A single human engineer, a forgotten prisoner, a choice that changed everything. Humanity was no longer just another young species. They were witnesses. They were proof. Days later, Ethan woke in a medical bay orbiting Earth. His body ached, but his mind was clear. Sunlight streamed through a viewport, blue and beautiful. A doctor noticed his eyes open and smiled. "Welcome back. You caused quite a mess out there." Ethan chuckled softly. "Yeah. Sorry about that." News screens nearby replayed the same headline again and again. "The chains are broken." Apparently, no one argues with her. Ethan leaned back, overwhelmed. Weeks passed. The galaxy changed. Old councils dissolved. New alliances formed. Entire doctrines were rewritten. The idea that power justified cruelty no longer went unchallenged. And everywhere the story spread, one detail stood out above all others. A human did not demand freedom. He offered it. One evening, as Ethan stood on a quiet observation deck, the stars shifted. Light gathered, soft and familiar. Elira appeared beside him, her presence calm as ever. "You heal quickly," she said. He turned, grinning. "Guess I'm stubborn," she smiled. "That is a human trait I have come to admire." They stood together, watching the stars. "So," Ethan said after a moment, "what are you going to do now?" She considered the question. "I will guard what must not be abused. I will speak where lies once ruled, and I will remind the galaxy that kindness is not weakness." He nodded. "Sounds like a lot of work." "Yes," she agreed, "which is why I came to ask you something." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh," she looked at him seriously. "Walk with me, Ethan Hale, not as a servant, not as a symbol, but as a reminder of why this galaxy is worth protecting." He didn't answer right away. Then he smiled. "Yeah," he said, "I think I can do that." Far beyond them, stars burned quietly, and across the galaxy a new truth settled into history. When faced with infinite power, humanity did not reach for control. They reached out a hand, and the universe answered.